Okay, wonderful. Right. I think we are live on both things. Let me move that screen down so people can see a little bit more about what I'm doing. So is the way I can never get my head in and the table in. Let's go there. Oh, right, wonderful. You know, when you have one of those mornings, just like going, just kind of trying to sort everything out, and then can come in the studio and I can talk to you lot for half an hour or so, and then can go back to the chaos of that the rest of the day is going to be bringing. Because hopefully, oh yeah, here we go. So I've got a friend stopping off here because she's got her car at the garage. Been to car in the garage having its MOT done. And I set all this up yesterday and then suddenly went, oh, I meant to be going and picking Jill up from the garage at that time. So I've had to call in a favour of a family member to go and pick her up instead. But anyway, we are here. We are hopefully all sorted. This is dyeing the December Seasonal Changes colour pack, which is the one that you have all chosen. It was really close this time between this Snowberry colourway, which was the reds and the greens and the creams, and the Sparkling Bauble colourway, which was the really rich jewel colours. But there was one vote in it, and I were going to be dyeing the Sparkling Bauble colourway, which is going to be this one. Let's go find pictures. They're hiding on here somewhere. Photos. Let's make the ancient iPad work. Oh, this is hard work. We've got them. So it's going to be this one. So these really rich colours, but we're not going to include the red at the very end because we only want 5 colours to go into these Cambrian packs. So it's going to be like a foresty green, a turquoise, a very dark navy, a plummy purple sort of colour, and a magenta. So I was quite happy to be able to get in the studio early this morning because there's kind of chaos going on here at the moment. So it kind of meant I could sneak in here because I got to measure out some more dyes that I knew I'd run out of stock solutions, and I've even already managed to get one of the Cambrian packs that was out of stock re-dyed, which is good. So I'm going to get started on coming up with the colour recipes. If you have any questions as we go along, then feel free to shout and go or put a message in the comments. YouTube, I see them really easily. Instagram, it's sometimes really hard to spot them because the phone's quite a long way away and the writing on it is really, really tiny. But hopefully I will manage to spot them. So if you've got any questions along the way, please do ask. If you're thinking, dyeing fibre doesn't look too hard, it's hard. The actual mechanics of it isn't. The colour development's a little bit more something you've got to get a bit more experienced with. But as you get more experience, you start to get a sense for what does and doesn't work. Then I have a online fibre dyeing course. The link's in the YouTube that channel if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Instagram, if you go into my profile, it's in the link tree bit there. So there are lots and lots of recorded videos, lots of written explanations, stuff to download, and you can ask for help as you go along. So without further ado, we are going to get started. So this is our colour palette. Okay, so it's these colours we're dyeing along here. Now, one of the things about this particular colour palette is it doesn't have as much tonal contrast as sometimes these seasonal changes packs normally do. So normally I try to dye so that we've got lights and darks and midtones, because that means if you are doing it as using it for colour work, as well as the colours contrasting the tonal value, so how light or dark it looks. If you flip the crayon into grayscale, is it closer to white or is it closer to black? This pack doesn't have that so much, but it does have a very, very good dark tone. And what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to make the turquoise slightly paler to give us a little bit more of a tonal variation on that front. So we will have a light and a dark in there, because although I use the pictures that I pull that people have developed colour palettes, sometimes I tweak and change them. And this is going to be one of those times when I go and tweak and change them. But I'm going to start off with the green foliage on the left hand end. And I need my notebook, because all of these have to be written down so that I can dye them again throughout the rest of the month. Down the title of what it is I'm dyeing, so it's not just a mystery recipe. So throughout December, the rest, if the first batch all sell out throughout December, I will dye it again, and more will be made available, basically until I stop work for Christmas. I don't know when I'm going to dye the January one yet, but as ever, if you're in the Fellowship of Yarn, you will definitely get to find out, because I will post about it there. So let's dye this green. And we're going to start off with this jadey coloured dye, which is far too blue toned for me to use on there. So that's what that green looks like. It's completely, it's not got anywhere near enough yellow in it, but we can make it more yellow by adding some yellow to it. Let's see where we've got to and see if we need more yellow. I just need, rather than getting my finger continually. So this is just kitchen roll, and it's really good just to develop and test out the colours. That's the green with a little bit more yellow in it. So that was the original green. That's it with a little bit more yellow in it. I want some more yellow again. And it might be we add a little bit of brown into it. It's the moment it's a bit too kind of tropical. So you can see how we've just shifted it ever so slightly more yellow toned, but the yellow doesn't have a massive impact on the jade. The jade is such a strong colour. 50 lemon. But I want to just mute it ever so slightly. Let's grab you actually rather than a jug. I want more of you for mixing. So this is just a really it's a very, very dark brown, which works quite well for just taking the edge off colours that are looking a bit over bright, and it's not quite as, bizarrely, it's not as muddy making as the black is. That's better. So just by adding that tiny bit of brown in, we've got sunshine coming through the window, which is doing very funky things to the contrast. There we go. So we started off with, that's our jade, that's with one lot of yellow, that's with another lot of yellow, and then we've just put a little bit of brown in. Now, the thing to remember when you're testing wet colours is they always look much darker than they do on dry fibre. So although that seems like, crikey, that's really dark, it's not going to end up staying quite as dark as that. So that's at a point where I'm happy with it. I never aim for perfect matches with the colour swatches. Yeah, I never aim for perfect matches with the colour swatches on these pictures. I always go for creating a set of colours that work well together, that capture the feel of this, rather than trusting somebody else who's done the colour matching out of the picture. Next up, we're going to go along to the turquoise colour, and this is the one that I said, in order to make it work better for fibre purposes, I'm going to make it paler than it is in this image. So in this image here, it's really quite dark and it's not giving us enough tonal value. But if we actually look at the picture, there are sections that are much, much, much paler than we see that the person who's come up with that colour palette has actually picked out. So, do I want as much as 25 turquoise? I don't think I do, because the turquoise is such a real... not all dye colours have the same intensity of colour. And that intensity changes depending upon the dye. Different dye manufacturers will be different. So it's no good just saying, oh, all turquoise dyes are going to be really, really bright and super strong, because they're not. So this is our pure turquoise. That's got some green on it. clean that off so that you can see what it looks like. So that's our pure turquoise dye there. But again, I want to just shift the colour palette ever so slightly on it. And I think what I'm actually going to do, again, I'm going to just deviate slightly away from the inspiration image because I want to make sure that this blue looks very different to the navy blue, which we're going to be dyeing next. I'm going to put a tiny bit of the jade green in that I used to make the green, the green we mixed up first. It just makes the colour look a little bit richer and more interesting. So rather than just relying on a primary colour, write that down. When I first started doing these as live streams, I was atrocious at remembering to write them down. Never remember. I always used to end up having to watch the video back to try and work out what I was doing because I was so busy talking I'd forget what I was actually trying to do. There we go. That's better. So these are our turquoises. Let me move that so that's out of the sun. That's the original one, and then that's the one that we've moved on to next. So we've just shifted the tonal value of it slightly away from mint blue and into a proper aqua-y colour. So this is going to need some water in it to dilute it down because it's the quantity of dye that affects the appearance, affects how bright or dark the fibre is. But in order to spread that dye out over the fibre, we need to dilute it with enough water that we can actually move the dye around. So that's our turquoisey colour, which I say I've toned down from the original picture because I want it to be acting as a paler option so that when if you use it for colour work, you've actually got some contrasts. We're now going to move on to the colour which is the darkest one. And whereas I described that turquoise as being a very cool blue, we're now going to dye what is going to be closer to being a warm blue. It's a proper inky, I think French navy would probably be quite a good description of it. So we want one. This is broken. I need to buy a new one. Persuade you to work. You won't work. There we go. 2. 3. Wonderful. The plastic parts gradually, you know, in that way that plastic eventually goes a bit brittle. And I meant to order some more. And then, of course, every time you go back into the house, you forget about it and don't remember to do it. Right. That is 75 of a proper royal blue. It's that colour there. So it's nowhere near dark enough for what we want. And it's just not a very interesting colour. So we're going to put some black in there. Now, anybody who's watched any of these before will know that the black that I use has got purple undertones to it, which will start to shift this navy more into the colour palette that we are after. So by just putting some black dye in there, we've gone from this royal blue into something that is much darker and much more interesting looking and closer to what we want. Let me just pull the picture up again and decide whether it needs any more black. Oh, sneezing. Or whether it wants anything of any other colour. That colour's a little bit dull for what I want. So even though I have just said I want it to be different to the turquoise, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put some of the jade in there. And it's going to make sure we keep that sort of jewel light palette. course, the more dye we use, the darker it will get. So probably on screen, I suspect you can't tell the difference between that navy and that navy. And that navy. So it's these two here. So that was without the jade and this was with the jade. But it's just livened that dark blue up a bit. So I think that's going to work for what I want to go with. So it's still got a little bit of, it's still very much a French navy with lots of royal blue undertones, but it's just a little bit more interesting. So when it goes onto the fibre, it's going to have a bit more depth of colour to it. So I just think it's a nicer looking colour. Right, next up we have got a plummy coloured purple. I'm just going to find. So anybody who's been watching these for a while knows that I hate having to dye these repeatable colourways with a magenta dye, because my magenta dye is an absolute pain. It's for staying dissolved. It's fine when it mixes and when the containment, when it's all nice and warm, but as soon as it cools down, all the dye particles fall out of solution, and it means that you end up with colours that are inconsistent, which is a bit of a nightmare when you're dyeing things that are repeatable colourways. So what we're going to do, I mixed up a fresh batch just for this to make sure that when I dye more during the rest of December, there's actually a chance that the colours are going to hopefully match. I do always kind of check and keep reference. If they're really wrong, I can go back and dye them again. But hopefully by mixing up an entire fresh batch of colour, I can be absolutely guaranteed that that's going to be the same shade of pink throughout. So we're going to start off with the purple first and then the pink, but I'm going to use this pink dye as the basis for both of them. I need another syringe to measure this out. Right, how pink do I want this pink? Oh, sorry, I'm doing purple first. I will think about the pink. Let's go for, this is purple's going to be quite a strong colour. Let's go for that much. And then in order to make it into the purple that we want, I'm actually going to use some black dye, I think, because I say this black has got purple undertones to it. Yes, I can use that one. And what I want to make sure that I do is I keep this colour quite nice and dark. So let's start off with 10. See where that takes us, and then decide whether it needs altering any further. So that's our magenta so far. Sorry, that's our purple so far. And it looks okay whilst wet, but I think that's not going to be dark enough to make sure it contrasts adequately with the pink. So I'm going to go for putting in the rest of that black, which I nearly did from the beginning. And I was like, it's a bit like adding salt in cooking. You can take it out, but so you can always add more, but you can't take away what you've already put in. Let's have a look. Okay. Now, I suspect, put that back up together. I suspect that looks horrendously dark for those of you looking on screens. It's not going to be anywhere near as dark as that once it's actually on fibre. And I think it's going to work okay as a contrast with the magenta that we're going to dye. Let's do a slightly grubby. Make sure. So finally, we've got the magenta. Which is our final colour, because remember, we're not going to dye that red, so we're dyeing this one here. Okay. So this is going to be a nice, vibrant pinky colour, and I'm probably just going to go for just this pink colour by itself. But again, I'm going to go for not making it too dark, because that's going to give us a little bit of contrast that we need. So you can see that just by itself, that magenta colour actually, I think it's going to work pretty good. This is going to need a little bit of water in it. Okay, so let me show you what it's going to look like as a complete colour palette, because I've got lots and lots of different shades along here, and it's nice for you to see where we've got to with them, with some water added in. Okay, there we go. So that's our vibe that we were going for. So we've got the green, the turquoise that I made much lighter, the inky navy, sort of French navy, a very dark plummy purple, and then a paler, relatively vibrant pink. So that's going to be our sparkling baubles colour palette. We're now ready to pop it onto some fibre. So I'm just going to tidy up this lot out of the way. All of this little the remaining bits of dyes that I've not used will all get used in something at some point in time. I just need a little bit more space on the table. That's better. We need a bit of cling film. Fibre went into soak yesterday in just some water with a bit of washing up liquid in it, just to help it get nice and soaked. Okay. So I've just squeezed out nearly all of the water. And then we're just going to lay it out. So all of these colours are what I describe as semi-solid. They are not a completely flat and uniform colour like you would get if you're buying commercially dyed fibre. Of course, this is all hand dyed, but I do try to aim for some evenness of tone, so there shouldn't be chunks of white bits. So we just need to work the dye through the fibre, and pressing down on it doesn't cause any issues with felting. We just don't want to rub it, and of course this is all cold, so we've got no heat either, so we're kind of not setting ourselves up for causing issues with felting. That looks pretty even. So this is all a low water method because I find that works best for fibre, rather than having lots of bubbling water, which then causes agitation. So that's our citric acid. So these are all acid dyes. Acid dyes need acidic conditions in order for the dye molecules to make a permanent bond onto the fibre. And to do that, you can use vinegar, but it smells. So I use citric acid because you can get hold of it nice and cheaply, and it's relatively, yeah, it doesn't smell. It makes things a little bit sticky if you start spilling it everywhere, but you can just make it up into a nice strong solution. So you don't have to add very much of it. So that's water squeezed out of the next chunk of fibre. So I think we're probably only going to pour these on in the reverse order of the way that of the order I mix them. So you can see how that pink that's on the table here, it's not going to be a super strong colour, which again is going to help us with that, wanting some bits of contrast. So just once. This is what I'm saying about this pink dye is a pale. I suspect that you can't see in the bottom there because it's probably just really dark, but because it's been sat in the cold metal jug, some of the magenta dye has already settled to the bottom. So I sometimes use, I've got a dye which is very fluorescent hot pink. I sometimes use that instead because it doesn't have the same problem, but it's different tonally to the magenta, and I really wanted the magenta dye for this one because it just sits, it matches the inspiration picture. It's less of that Barbie pink sort of vibe. So, and the hot pink's also an absolute pain to get to exhaust properly. So it takes ages and ages and ages for all the dye molecules to bond onto the fibre. So this is our plummy purple, which, as you can see, has come out on the fibre. It looks much less dark. Having word failure today. There we go. And we're just rolling these up nice and tightly. And then these acid dyes require heat in order to make a bond with the wool. So these will go into my oven for about 30 to 40 minutes, basically until all the dye molecules have bonded onto the fibre. Nice and squeezed out. Okay. So this is our French navy bluey colour. I'm going to do exactly the same. So blues are another colour that are hard to get to completely exhaust, and they don't make a very stable bond with the fibre either. If you've ever spun or worked with yarn that's left your hands blue, it's purely because even if it was completely set when it was with the person who's dyed it, the blue molecules are so large and they don't make a completely firm attachment onto the wool molecules in the way that some of the other colours do. So depending on your particular skin chemistry, or depending on the hand cream you like to use, or depending upon what your water's like, blue molecules are the ones that are most likely to not stay attached onto the fibre like they're meant to. They are one of those fibres that it used to be that at one point everybody was saying, oh yes, you need to set the dye by washing it in water with vinegar added, and you're not setting the dye if you do that, but you're making it less likely for the dye bonds that were already there to break. So particularly if you live in somewhere that's got quite hard water, you get lots of lime scale, it is worth adding a glug of vinegar or lemon juice to the water that you wash your hand knits in, because wool likes acidic conditions. And these dye molecules and the bonds they make with the wool like acidic conditions, so you'll get less problems with bleeding and colours rubbing if you rinse stuff in water that's slightly acidic. Because I don't have that problem here, because we have naturally acidic water. We actually have a pH corrector to make our water closer to neutral if we would just let it be as it is, because we use water that comes out of a spring on the hillside that's then filtered and treated to make sure it's got no bugs in it. And it has a pH corrector. It has some calcium carbonate that the whole thing filters through to stop the water being too acidic, because otherwise it eats the copper pipes. When we first moved here, and when nobody had really done anything with the water system for a very, very long time, the pH corrector hadn't been topped up in ages, and as a result you used to get blue bath water, because you used to get in the bath and the water would have quite a lot of copper dissolved into it, and it would then react with something that was in the soap or the shampoo, and you basically used to get a very faint blue copper solution. So this is our pale turquoisey colour. So these are all wrapped nice and tightly. Because the tighter you wrap them, the more the molecules, well, the more the liquid stays in contact with the fibre, and you get more even results. Okay, final colour. So far it's kind of, it doesn't seem very festive, but I think the green is probably the thing that pushes it over into being a little bit more Christmas baubles, as opposed to sort of hydrangea vibe, really. Those blues and purples and colours. I think I did do a hydrangea one earlier this year. So yeah, so if you're watching this and you think, how do I be part of the people who get to choose these colours? If you go onto the Hilltop Cloud website, there's this link up at the top that says the Hilltop Cloud community, and it's called the Fellowship of Yarn. And there are different sections within there, and one of them is called Seasonal Changes, and it's where I put up a choice of 3 colour pictures towards the end of every single month, so that I can dye the next colour palette, and you just leave a comment saying this is the one that you like best, and I then dye them. It used to be I chose the colours, and I thought it'd be quite fun to let other people choose them now and again. So that's what we now do. Occasionally I deviate from that because there's just not, I've ran out of time to put some colour choices up, or there's just something that I really wanted to dye. But most of the time you guys get to choose these colours. They're only available for 1 month. So I think there's a very small number of the November one left, but the chances are there's not going to be any more of that one dyed. And then once it's sold out, it's gone for good. So it kind of keeps the colour selection really fresh and interesting. And if you don't like this month's, it means that next month, well, you might like that one better. We've had quite a variety over the past few months, but here's where we have ended up. So we've got our greens, turquoises and blues, and our couple of pinky purples, and hopefully I've messed about with the colour palette enough that we're going to get some nice, good enough contrasts for people who want to do sort of colour work and that sort of thing. But there's people who do all sorts of really clever things with these. There's some people do carded mixtures, there's some people turn them into like fractal spins, there's somebody who's making a beautiful crocheted blanket from the pack that she buys each month. So I would say it's like a club, but not a club, because you don't have to, I don't do any subscriptions for this. It's just a case of, if you like it, you can buy it. And if you don't like it, you can pass on a month. But yeah, so that's ready to go into the oven. I have got lots more Cambrian packs to dye for the rest of today. Hopefully once I've got the oven on, it's going to start warming up a little bit in here, because it's a nice day for December, but it's a little bit chilly until the heating's on. But having the oven on makes a load of background noise, so I thought I'll leave it off whilst I'm talking to you. If you want to know more about dyeing, the link again is on my website. And I shall see you all at some point during December, when we'll be dyeing the pack for January, which will be made available at the start of the month. So I shall see you all some time soon. Let's click on you and you.